Welcome back to The Look and Sound of Leadership, an ongoing series of executive coaching tips designed to help you be perceived in the workplace the way you want to be perceived. I'm Tom Henschel, your executive coach, and today we're talking about the executive impostor. Anna knew her pattern, but she couldn't stop it. Anna was a young executive of amazing achievements. She had created a brand within a multi-million-dollar company. She had just thought it up. Along the way, between conception and execution, at every possible roadblock, people said yes to her. When she'd first mentioned the idea to her boss, Nicole, she was told yes. When Nicole put her in front of the head of the division, she was told yes. When they took her to the company president, she was told yes. And a brand was born because of Anna. Towards the beginning of our coaching, as we were still getting to know each other, I asked her to tell me the story. She did, with much modesty. At every turn, she told me how she had been lucky, or how the only reason she had succeeded was because the bar had been lowered for her. But objectively, the accomplishment of the story could not be denied. It was just plain triumphant. I said, "Anna, you're a unicorn. This never happens. Good for you." I saw her waver. She seemed to be having a dozen thoughts all at once. I waited. She whispered, "I'm struggling here. I'm trying to just take your damn compliment." I watched. "I know I did good, Tom, did well. But when you say it to me, when anyone says it to me, I go kind of blank. I feel myself push away anything good, and don't even get me started on my perfectionism." Without pause, she gave a horrified smile and said, "Do you know what I did one night? I tortured myself over a mistake I was pretty certain I had made during a presentation. I stayed up all night. I was in a frenzy, and then it turned out I didn't make the mistake at all, and I happen to know I didn't, because after that night, I went around asking everybody about it. Nicole had to finally take me aside and tell me to let it go." Anna dusted her hands and said, "If I'm not perfect, shame on me." Which is a lot of pressure to put on a girl, don't you think? And now here I am about to make my first presentation to the board. Is it any wonder I'm a wreck? Uncertain how she'd answer, I asked, "Have all your big presentations up until now gone well?" She ducked her head and gave a little shake. I know. There's no evidence of a problem. But I worry anyway. It's just my pattern. I worry." "Does the worry ebb and flow?" I asked. "Well, I'm not on medication, at least not yet, as long as I don't completely lose my mind." More seriously, she said, "I suppose it does ebb. I've just lived with it so long, I think of it like a constant. I'm certainly never surprised when it shows up." I asked, "Have you named it?" "Have I named what?" "This part of you. You say you've lived with it so long, it sounds like another person." "More like a parasite," she laughed. I asked, "Anna, have you ever talked with anyone about this? A sister, a friend?" She jerked her head back, smiling. "Are you kidding? You obviously do not understand what it means to be perfect." "Would it surprise you," I asked, "if I told you that I've had those exact same feelings?" "You have not." "I have. The number of people who share these feelings at some time or other is said to be 70%. 70% of everyone you know experiences what you just described. Not necessarily at the same intensity or in the same way, but the feelings are the same." She softened. 70%? How'd they figure that out? "Well, it started with one woman, actually," I said, "back in the 1970s. She was a psychology professor who noticed that her undergrad students constantly felt undeserving. Students who were getting A's felt they didn't deserve their good grades. A lot of them even thought their admissions to the college had been a mistake. So she and a female colleague studied the women on campus, the students, the faculty, the staff, and they found that about 70% of the women on campus reported feeling that they had not earned their accomplishments. I continued, "The two professors named these feelings the imposter experience." Anna gasped. That's a great word. That's what it feels like, that I'm an imposter and someone's going to find out. The word I like is fraudulence, I said. She pointed at me. That's a good word, too. Theatrically, I said, don't pull back the curtain. Don't reveal the fraud that's hiding back there. She asked, so this imposter experience is a woman thing? Oh, no, I said, it's a people thing. It's been recreated across genders, across ethnicities, across races. It's pretty universal. No way, she said. 70% of the population is staying awake over something they completely made up? I don't believe that. Well, like I say, Anna, everyone experiences it in their own way. But I spend a lot of time listening to people. I bear witness. People sometimes feel like frauds and worry that others are going to find out. What about you? She asked. You said you had it. What was yours like? I thought a second, and then I said, I remember one time in particular. I was fresh out of Juilliard. I got a job almost overnight at the Ahmanson Theater in Los Angeles. This theater seated about 3,000 people, and, that's a lot of tickets to sell for live theater, so they put big stars in their show. And I got cast as a, little spear carrier, which was fine. But then, for a whole week, I had to go on for the guy I was understudying. And it wasn't a giant part, but I had to carry my weight with all these amazing people. And I did okay, I think. But oh, that week, I felt like a total fraud, total imposter syndrome. What about now? She asked. Do you experience it now? Feeling like a fraud? I asked. I don't think so, which is not to say I don't have doubts sometimes. Do you think it went away as you got older? Partly, I said. But age is no guarantee. There are plenty of older people who have imposter syndrome. I thought it was imposter experience, she said. Yes, right. That is how the phrase started. It was also called imposter phenomenon. But over the years, it's morphed. These days, it's mostly imposter syndrome. And personally, I'm not crazy about that word. I think syndrome sounds like a disease or a disorder, and it's not. It's just a series of feelings. Nothing's wrong with you if you have those feelings. She looked at me sideways. Are you telling me that if I went down the hall right now and plopped myself into Nicole's office, she'd know what we're talking about? Mock seriously, I said, that's one thing to give credit for. Imposter syndrome is an equal opportunity offender. Then more seriously, I said, it makes sense that people higher up might experience it sometimes, doesn't it? There's more at stake. Well, said Anna, if Nicole ever feels like a fraud, she's hiding it pretty well. Which doesn't mean she doesn't feel it now and then. That's another thing about imposter syndrome, Anna. It comes and goes. Sometimes people go without it for years, and then it comes back. Well, I would love it if mine would take a year off. You got any tricks? I see people break the cycle two different ways, I said. First, they create a contract with reality. They see the worry is unwarranted. They see that perfectionism is not reality. She pushed out her lips and then said, I'm thinking about all those strengths in my 360 that I kept waving away, saying people were just being nice. That was not exactly balanced. True, I said. But you just tried to accept a compliment from me. That's the beginning of a contract with reality. I see people teach their reality voice to speak up and say, no, you are not a fraud. Calling yourself a fraud is completely unwarranted. Don't do it. With a little huff, she said, my reality voice doesn't speak up nearly often enough. Well, that's why I asked if you'd named it. People say it helps when they make the imposter voice a separate part of themselves. They give it a name. I saw a TED Talk where this wonderful wry Southern woman named her imposter voice Ms. Vader, as in Darth Vader, and her hero voice Betty Lou. She tells how nowadays Betty Lou is winning pretty much all the time. She said, the word unwarranted is really sticking with me. Feeling like a fraud is one thing, but feeling like a fraud when it's not warranted, well, that just doesn't seem fair now, does it? And I don't like it when things aren't fair. So fairness might be a good way for me to think about this. What else do people do? The second thing that people do is talk about it. They normalize it. I don't know about you, Anna, but when I can hold on to the idea that this fraud feeling is a human feeling, not just a Tom feeling, it makes it easier for me to stay in reality. I don't put so much energy into not being found out. She gave a little shiver. I do worry that someone might find me out. But I said, if we're all that way, the secret's not so shameful, right? Talking about it to other people helps. What's your sense, Anna? How would it affect your thinking if you accepted that 70% of the people around you also worry about being found out? She gave a twinkly smirk. Well, I wouldn't be nearly so special, would I? But I wouldn't have to be so perfect either. During our coaching, Anna gave names to her imposter voice and her reality voice, and then she told her teenage daughter about those two parts of herself. The result was a heartfelt conversation that took them deep into the look and sound of leadership. You know this feeling, right? I mean, I'm just sure you do. The whole purpose of this episode was to give you some tools so that you can manage that imposter voice when you hear it. But first, of course, you have to learn to hear it. During the whole first part of this episode, Anna talked with that imposter voice. Think for a second about what had happened to her. She came up with some random idea and she mentioned it to her boss. Now, this is inside of an enormous global company. Her boss heard her idea and thought her idea was so good that the division president ought to hear it. So Anna told him her idea, and he thought it was so good that his boss should hear it, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and it was all just Anna's idea, and everyone was looking at Anna and was more than willing to make her a star. But from her side, Anna felt like a fraud. Do you remember what she said? It only happened because she'd been lucky, or because the bar had been lowered for her. She didn't think she deserved what she'd earned. She didn't know how to take a compliment. Those are the things you're listening for. Listen for them in others, because if you hear them, you might be able to have some compassion and really help that person stay grounded in reality. And of course, you're also listening for that voice in yourself, right? It's the voice that takes your accomplishments and says, hey, Buster, you don't really deserve that, you know. That's the voice of the imposter. So once you learn to recognize it, what do? There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is make a contract with reality. Talk back to the voice. Talk reality. The longer answer, I am going to tell you the longer answer, but before I do, I want to explain the two resources that I mentioned in this episode, and I want to tell you about two things. Okay, so first, two resources. By the way, time out. For those of you who know sorting and labeling, can you hear the tool happening? And doesn't it make it easy to follow? Gotta love sorting and labeling. Okay, so the two resources. First, I mentioned two professors. They were at Georgia State University. Their names were Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, and they were the first psychologists to recognize this thing and give it a name. And that has been so helpful. So thanks to them. The other resource is this TED Talk by a woman named Lou Solomon. It's called The Surprising Solution to the Imposter Syndrome. Lou Solomon appears to me to be a straight-shooting, wise academic leader in the body of a down-home country woman, and she is talking about imposter syndrome. I really enjoyed listening to her. So, those are the two resources. Now, the two things to tell you. First, this episode is going live at the beginning of November 2018. The next episode will hit your feed at the beginning of December, and in that episode, for the first time in the more than 10-year history of this podcast, you're going to hear another voice besides mine. Mindy Dana is going to join me here, and we are going to answer your questions live on the air. I'm really excited to introduce you to Mindy. She's a coach, like I am, but she comes from a whole other discipline, so we often think about the same problem through different doors. I always love listening to Mindy, and I think you will too, so get excited. Not too long to wait. The second thing I want to tell you about is my gratitude. There are so many things in my life that I am grateful for, And you, the podcasting community, is one of those things. I have a big bucket full of gratitude for the emails that you send me, for the requests you make to subscribe to the HTML version, for the ideas that you share with me, for the encouragement you give me, and each month for the people who take the time to post a review in iTunes. Special gratitude to them. This month they are from Canada, JarL30, from Australia, MPF0, from New Zealand, Trev2205, and here in the US, this is VP, Parmas1, Have Your Day, L3 at D2URWHY. Thanks to each of you for taking the time and making the effort to post a review. I am very grateful. Okay, so I mentioned that there was a longer answer to the question about how to overcome the imposter voice. The longer answer is about taking it out of the shadows. Get rid of the shame and embarrassment. Tell someone about it. Just get up the courage to out yourself and ask them if they've ever felt that way themselves. See what happens. Anna talked about it with several people, one of whom was her teenage daughter. It was a fantastic experience for them both. Another part of the longer answer about how to combat imposter syndrome is listen to some related episodes, browse through the categories. I tagged this episode in 4 categories. The first one, for women. I know that during the episode, I said that imposter syndrome is not a women's thing, and it's not. However, as a coach, I talk about imposter syndrome with a lot more women than I do men. Now, of course, maybe that means that men need it even more than the women do, and I think maybe they do, by the way, but no matter. I tagged this in for women, managing yourself, perception, how you perceive yourself, and self-talk. If you are wondering what categories am I talking about, it's the archive of the podcast on the Essential Communications website. We're at essentialcom with 2ms.com. I have written about ideas that are related to imposter syndrome for years. 5 that you might listen to are act as if, acting on the corporate stage, inhabiting executive presence, self-awareness and self-management, and the many parts of you. And of course, each of those has their own related list of episodes, right? So down the rabbit hole we go. Have a good time. That's it from me. See you next month with Mindy. Until next time, I'm Tom Henschel. Thanks so much for listening.